Welcome to Sci-Fi Beyond, where we bring you the most captivating HFY and sci-fi stories that will transport you to worlds beyond your wildest imagination. Today's sci-fi story is a thrilling tale of love, courage, and the indomitable human spirit in the face of unimaginable horror. In a galaxy consumed by the terrifying Erebus Plague, two brilliant scientists, Dr. Benedict Vasquez and Dr. Elara Vestri, must navigate a treacherous web of conspiracy and betrayal as they race to uncover the truth behind the plague and the sinister forces that seek to control it. Let's begin.
The sickly green glow of the containment tanks bathed the lab in an eerie, pulsating light. Dr. Ben Vasquez stared at the grotesque forms floating within, his stomach churning with a potent mix of revulsion and fascination. Ugly fuckers, aren't they? Dr. Elara Vestri sidled up next to him, her crisp Italian accent cutting through the hum of the machinery. Even in a sterile lab coat, her figure managed to be distracting. Ben grunted. The Erebus Plague doesn't make for pretty test subjects. Elara snorted. No shit. Hard to believe these things used to be human. Ben couldn't tear his eyes away from the nearest tank. The creature inside had once been a colonist from some far-flung outpost, one of the desperate volunteers the Interstellar Medical Corps had lured in with promises of a cure. Now it was a mass of pulsating tumors and grasping tentacles, its humanity stripped away by the relentless onslaught of the alien virus. We're going to stop this, Ben said, his jaw clenching with determination. We have to. Elara's hand brushed his arm, her touch electric even through layers of fabric. We will, Benedict. But first, another exciting day of playing God awaits. Ben followed her to their shared workstation, trying to ignore the way her hips swayed beneath her lab coat. They had work to do, and he couldn't afford distractions. Not when the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The next few hours passed in a blur of gene sequencing, viral load analysis, and increasingly creative profanity as the Erebus Plague continued to defy their efforts to unravel its secrets. Ben's eyes burned from staring at holographic displays, and his head throbbed with the beginnings of a migraine. A soft hand on his shoulder startled him out of his work-induced trance. You need a break, Benedict, Elara murmured, her breath warm against his ear. Come on, let's get some coffee. Ben opened his mouth to protest, but the words died on his tongue as Elara's fingers slid down his arm, her touch sending shivers racing down his spine. He let her lead him out of the lab, into the stark white corridors of Prometheus Station. They walked in silence, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a scalpel. As they waited for their coffee to brew in the cramped break room, Elara turned to face him, her hazel eyes boring into his. You're pushing yourself too hard, Benedict, she said softly, reaching up to brush a stray lock of hair from his forehead. You need to take care of yourself. Ben's breath hitched as her fingers trailed down his cheek, coming to rest on his chest. I can't afford to slow down, he managed, his voice hoarse, not with so much at stake. Elara smiled, a slow, sensual curve of her lips, all the more reason to seize the moment. No? Life is too short, especially in our line of work. She leaned in, her body pressing against his in a way that made his pulse quicken and his thoughts scatter. Her lips brushed his ear as she whispered, Carpe diem, Dr. Vasquez. A shrill alarm shattered the moment, the blaring klaxons jolting them apart. Ben's heart raced for an entirely different reason as he recognized the urgent code flashing on his AR display. Containment breach in the specimen holding area, he said sharply, already running for the door. Suit up, now. They raced through the winding corridors of Prometheus Station, hastily donning the sleek, armored hazard suits designed to protect against the Erebus Plague. Ben's mind whirled with potential disaster scenarios, each more nightmarish than the last. As they neared the holding area, they were met by the ominous thump of heavy machinery and the crackle of pulse rifles. Around the corner, a squad of IMC security personnel crouched behind hastily erected barricades, their weapons trained on an unseen threat. What's the situation? Ben barked, his voice muffled by his suit's respirator. The squad leader, a grizzled veteran with cold eyes, spared him a glance. One of your damn pet monsters got loose. Doc, we're trying to contain it, but a blood-curdling shriek cut him off, echoing from the darkened chamber ahead. Ben felt his blood run cold as he recognized the inhuman sound, the hunting cry of an Erebus warped abomination. Fuck me sideways, Elara breathed, her voice tinny over the suit's comm link. Is that what I think it is? Ben nodded grimly, unholstering the pulse pistol at his hip. A stage 6 mutation, if it gets out of the holding area. He let the thought hang unfinished. They all knew the stakes. If even a single Erebus-infected creature escaped Prometheus Station, the consequences for the human colonies would be unthinkable. Lock and load. The squad leader bellowed. Light that fucker up the moment it shows its ugly face. The words had barely left his mouth when a writhing mass of flesh and metal burst from the shadows, its twisted limbs propelling it forward with terrifying speed. The creature had once been human, but the Erebus Plague had warped it into a grotesque parody of life, all glistening tumors and pulsating, exposed organs. The security team opened fire, the air crackling with the sizzle of pulse rounds. The creature shrieked as the bolts tore into its misshapen flesh, but it kept coming, its wounds sealing almost as quickly as they were inflicted. Fucking hell! One of the guards screamed. It's not going down. Ben watched in horror as a barbed tentacle lashed out, impaling the screaming guard and tossing him aside like a rag doll. The man's agonized wails turned into wet, choking gurgles as the creature's appendage punched through his chest, his blood splattering the pristine walls and abstract patterns of crimson. Fall back! Ben roared, dragging Elara behind a support pillar as the creature surged forward, scything through the remaining guards with brutal efficiency. Pulse fire ricocheted off its armored hide, the security team's panicked shots going wide as they fell one by one to the abomination's relentless onslaught. In a matter of heartbeats, only Ben and Elara remained, huddled behind their rapidly disintegrating cover. The creature swiveled its eyeless head towards them, its maw gaping open to reveal rows of jagged, metallic teeth. Well, fuck, Elara panted, her voice shaky. Guess this is it, Ben. Ben's mind raced, desperate for a solution. And then, with a sudden, gut-wrenching clarity, he remembered the emergency failsafe built into the station's containment systems. The plasma conduits, he said urgently, his fingers flying over his suit's wrist-mounted control panel. If we can lure it into the main junction and overload the system. Elara's eyes widened. We'll fry the bastard, but the whole deck will go up with it. Ben met her gaze, his jaw set with grim determination. It's the only way. On my mark, run like hell for the maintenance shaft. I'll keep it busy. Elara's hand shot out, gripping his arm with desperate strength. No way, Benedict. I'm not leaving you behind. Someone has to trigger the overload. It's the only way to make sure this thing doesn't escape. Please, Elara, I need you to live, to finish what we started. Tears glistened in Elara's eyes, but she nodded, her grip tightening for a fraction of a heartbeat. You damn well better be right behind me, you self-sacrificing bastard, or I'll drag you back from hell myself. Ben managed a tight smile. Wouldn't expect anything less. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Then, with a last, lingering glance at the woman he'd come to care for more than he ever admitted, he stepped out from behind the pillar, his pulse pistol raised. Hey, ugly! He shouted, his voice raw with fear and defiance. Come and get me, you son of a bitch! The creature's head snapped around, its eyeless gaze fixing on Ben with predatory intensity. It coiled its misshapen limbs beneath it, preparing to lunge, its maw yawning open in a wordless snarl. Behind him, Ben heard the pounding of Elara's footsteps as she raced for the maintenance shaft, her ragged breaths echoing over the comm link. He blocked out the sound, focusing all his attention on the monstrosity before him. That's right, he growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. Eyes on me, you ugly fuck. The creature sprang, its twisted body uncoiling like a grotesque jack-in-the-box. Ben opened fire, the pulse rounds sparking off the abomination's hide as he backpedaled frantically, leading it towards the thrumming conduits at the heart of the deck. He felt the searing heat of the plasma even through his suit as he reached the central junction, the air shimmering with barely contained energy. The creature lunged, its razor-tipped appendages slicing through the air with terrifying speed. Ben dodged, dropping into a roll that carried him beneath the flailing tentacles. He came up on one knee, his pistol leveled at the pulsing power conduits. Chew on this, motherfucker, he spat, and pulled the trigger. The world dissolved into a maelstrom of blinding light and roaring sound as the plasma conduits ruptured, the searing energy engulfing the shrieking creature. Ben felt the heat wash over him, the force of the explosion hurling him backwards like a leaf in a hurricane. He slammed into the far wall, the impact driving the breath from his lungs. His vision swam, darkening at the edges as he struggled to retain consciousness. Through the haze of pain and disorientation, he saw the creature thrashing in the heart of the inferno, its flesh sloughing away in blackened strips. And then, with a final, agonized shriek, The abomination crumpled, its twisted form dissolving into ash and embers. The deck shuddered as secondary explosions ripped through the compromised systems, the scream of tortured metal echoing through the flickering, smoke-choked air. Ben dragged himself to his feet, his head pounding and his vision blurring. He staggered towards the maintenance shaft, every step an agony of effort. His suit's systems blared warnings in his ear, the cool, mechanical voice informing him of multiple breaches and system failures. As he reached the shaft, he saw Elara's face peering up at him, her eyes wide with fear and relief. Her lips moved, but her words were lost to the roaring in his ears. He felt her hands on him, dragging him into the shaft moments before another blast rocked the deck. The world faded in and out of focus as Elara half-carried, half-dragged him through the twisting maintenance tunnels, the station collapsing around them. He clung to consciousness through sheer force of will, his mind filled with a grim litany of all the questions left unanswered, all the battles left unfought. The Erebus Plague still ravaged the far-flung colonies. The twisted machinations of the IMC still threatened everything he held dear. But as he looked up into Elara's soot-streaked face, her eyes shining with unshed tears and fierce determination, he felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. They'd survive the day, if only by the skin of their teeth. And for now, that would have to be enough. The Erebus Plague had taken more than its pound of flesh, and untold challenges still waited ahead of them. But with Elara at his side, Ben couldn't help but believe that they just might see this thing through to the end. After all, they were only just getting started. Content warning: this story contains strong language, graphic violence, body horror, and suggestive themes. Arc 2, Metamorphosis. The aftermath of the containment breach left Prometheus Station reeling, as repair crews worked around the clock to restore the damaged systems. Dr. Ben Vasquez and Dr. Elara Vestri found themselves called before the station's command staff to account for the disaster. "You're telling me," Director Kaida said, her voice dripping with barely contained fury, "that not only did you fail to contain the specimen, but you also managed to destroy an entire deck in the process?" Ben stood stiffly at attention, his jaw clenched. "With respect, Director, we had no choice. The creature was too powerful, too fast. If we hadn't overloaded the plasma conduits, it would have torn through the station like tissue paper." Elara stepped forward, her shoulder brushing his in a gesture of solidarity. "Dr. Vasquez's quick thinking saved countless lives. Director, the damage to the station is regrettable, but it pales in comparison to the catastrophe we avoided." Kaida's eyes narrowed, her gaze flicking between the two of them like a laser sight. "Be that as it may, this incident has raised serious concerns about the viability of Project Prometheus. The Interstellar Medical Corps has invested billions in this research, and we expect results, not excuses." Ben felt a flicker of anger at the director's callous dismissal of the lives lost, but he bit back his retort. Antagonizing Kaida would only make their situation worse. "We understand, Director," he said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. "Dr. Vestri and I will redouble our efforts to find a cure for the Erebus Plague. You have my word." Kaida leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "See that you do, Dr. Vasquez. The future of the human colonies rests on your shoulders. Fail us again, and the consequences will be severe." With that ominous warning ringing in their ears, Ben and Elara were dismissed. They walked in silence through the station's winding corridors, the weight of the director's ultimatum hanging over them like a sword of Damocles. As they neared the labs, Elara stopped abruptly, turning to face Ben with a look of grim determination. "She's hiding something, Benedict." The way she talked about the viability of the project, like it was just another line item on a balance sheet. Ben nodded, his brow furrowed. "I caught that too. And did you notice how she didn't even flinch when we mentioned the casualties? It's like she doesn't care about anything but results." Elara's eyes flashed with anger. "Bafankulo. These are people's lives we're talking about, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. If the IMC only sees us as expendable cogs in their machine." She trailed off, her fists clenched at her sides. Ben reached out instinctively, his hand coming to rest on her shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, "we're not going to let that happen. We'll find the truth, Elara, and we'll make sure the sacrifices of the people here weren't in vain." Elara met his gaze, her eyes searching his. For a moment, the air between them crackled with an unspoken tension, a shared understanding of the burdens they carried and the battles yet to come. Then, with a soft sigh, Elara leaned forward, resting her forehead against Ben's chest. I'm just so tired, Benedict. Tired of the secrets, the lies, the constant fear that we're just pawns in someone else's game. Ben wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. I know, Elara. I feel it too, but we can't give up. Not now, not when we're so close to the truth. They stood like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other's presence. When they finally pulled apart, there was a new resolve in Elara's eyes, a fire that burned away the weariness and doubt. You're right, she said, squaring her shoulders. We have work to do. And this time, we're not just going to study the Erebus Plague. We're going to unravel the web of secrets surrounding it, no matter where it leads. Ben grinned, feeling a surge of pride and affection for the fierce, determined woman before him. Damn straight. Let's get to it. As they entered the lab, the familiar hum of machinery and the soft beeping of monitors greeted them. But beneath the veneer of normalcy, Ben could feel a new undercurrent of urgency, a sense that time was running out. They threw themselves into their work with renewed intensity, poring over the data from the latest round of experiments. The Erebus Plague continued to defy their attempts to decipher its genetic structure, its viral RNA shifting and mutating at an alarming rate. It's almost like it's evolving in real time, Elara muttered, her eyes glued to the holographic display. Every time we think we've found a weakness, a potential avenue for treatment, it adapts and changes. Ben leaned in, studying the writhing strands of genetic code. It's not natural, he said slowly, a cold realization dawning. This level of adaptability, of rapid mutation, it's too precise, too targeted to be random. Elara's head snapped up, her eyes widening. You think it was engineered? That someone created this monstrosity on purpose? Ben's mind raced, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with sickening clarity. Think about it, Elara. The way the IMC has been so secretive about the project, the pressure they're putting on us to deliver results. He swallowed hard, his next words tasting like ash in his mouth. What if they're not just trying to cure the plague? What if they're trying to control it, to weaponize it? Elara recoiled as if struck, her face draining of color. Dio mio, Benedict. If you're right, then we've been played for fools. The IMC isn't trying to save humanity, they're trying to create a new breed of super soldier. The implications hung in the air between them, a suffocating weight of horror and betrayal. Ben's mind flashed back to the twisted, writhing forms in the containment tanks, the agonized screams of the test subjects as the virus ravaged their bodies and minds. Had it all been for this? All the suffering, all the sacrifice, just to create a new weapon in the IMC's arsenal? A cold, hard knot of anger settled in Ben's gut, a smoldering ember of rage that threatened to consume him. He clenched his fists, his nails biting into his palms hard enough to draw blood. We have to stop them, he said, his voice low and dangerous. We can't let the IMC pervert our work, twist it into something monstrous. Elara nodded, her jaw set with grim determination. Agreed. But we need proof, Benedict. Hard evidence of what they're doing. Something that will blow this whole sordid affair wide open. Ben's mind raced, sifting through the fragments of data and snippets of overheard conversations. And then, like a bolt of lightning, it hit him. The secure archives, he said, his eyes alight with sudden understanding. If the IMC is really behind the Erebus Plague, if they've been experimenting on people in secret, there'll be records, documentation of their research. Elara's eyes narrowed, a slow smile spreading across her face. And I know just how to get our hands on it. Leave it to me, Benedict. The first have a few tricks up my sleeve when it comes to persuading people to share information. The way she said it, the sly, mischievous glint in her eye, sent a shiver down Ben's spine. He knew Elara was as brilliant as she was beautiful, but in that moment, he caught a glimpse of the steel beneath the silk, the razor-sharp mind behind the soft curves and warm smiles. I don't doubt it, he said, a wry grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Just be careful, Elara. We're playing with fire here, and I don't want you to get burned. Elara laughed, a low, throaty sound that made Ben's pulse quicken. Oh, don't worry about me, Caro. I know how to handle the heat. With that, she turned on her heel and strode out of the lab, a woman on a mission. Ben watched her go, feeling a swell of admiration and something deeper, something he wasn't quite ready to name. But there was no time for introspection, no time for distractions. The truth was out there, buried beneath layers of secrecy and deceit, and one way or another, He and Elara were going to find it. The next few days passed in a blur of feverish activity, as Ben and Elara worked to unravel the tangled web of the IMC's machinations. Elara's persuasion had paid off, granting them access to the secure archives and the damning evidence they contained. The truth, when they finally uncovered it, was worse than they could have ever imagined. The Erebus Plague wasn't just a weapon, it was the key to a new era of human evolution, a twisted path to godhood paved with the corpses of the innocent. And at the center of it all was a name, whispered in secret communiques and redacted reports. Dr. Lucas Stein, the mastermind behind Project Prometheus, the man who had set the Erebus Plague loose upon the unsuspecting colonies. "We have to find him," Ben said, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "We have to stop him before it's too late." Elara nodded, her eyes hard as diamonds. "We will, Benedict. We'll track him down and make him pay for what he's done, and then we'll burn this whole fucking conspiracy to the ground." But even as they laid their plans, fate had other ideas. A chime from the comm system shattered the tense silence, and Ben's blood ran cold as he saw the urgent message flashing on the screen. "Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Vestri, report to containment immediately. We have a situation with the test subjects. They're changing." Ben and Elara exchanged a look of dread, the unspoken fear hanging heavy between them. The Erebus Plague was evolving, mutating at an exponential rate, and if they didn't find a way to stop it, the horrors they had witnessed so far would pale in comparison to the nightmare to come. As they raced through the halls of Prometheus Station, the weight of their mission heavy on their shoulders, Ben couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against the clock, that every second brought them closer to a reckoning they might not survive. But he pushed the fear aside, focusing on the warmth of Elara's hand in his, the steely determination in her eyes. Together, they would face whatever horrors the Erebus Plague had in store. Together, they would fight to save what was left of their humanity, even if it meant sacrificing everything they held dear. The doors to containment loomed before them, a portal to a world of unimaginable terror and wonder. Ben took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders as he prepared to step into the unknown. "Ready?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elara squeezed his hand, a ghost of a smile flickering across her face. "As I'll ever be. Let's do this, Benedict. For Earth, for the colonies, for us." With that, they plunged into the heart of darkness, ready to face the metamorphosis that awaited them, come what may. Content warning: this story contains strong language, graphic violence, body horror and suggestive themes. Arc 3, Insurrection. The scene in containment was one of unimaginable horror. The test subjects, once human, had transformed into something monstrous, their bodies twisted and warped by the mutating virus. They writhed in their restraints, their agonized screams echoing off the sterile walls. Dr. Ben Vasquez stared in mute shock, his mind reeling as he tried to process the nightmare unfolding before him. Beside him, Dr. Elara Vestri let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. "Dio mio," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What have we done, Benedict? What have we unleashed?" Ben shook his head, unable to tear his gaze away from the abominations thrashing in their tanks. "This isn't our fault, Elara. We didn't know, we couldn't have known." But even as the words left his mouth, he felt a sickening twist of guilt in his gut. They had been so focused on unraveling the secrets of the Erebus Plague, on exposing the IMC's twisted machinations, that they had forgotten the true cost of their work. The lives ruined, the families torn apart, all in the name of a cure that now seemed further away than ever. A sudden commotion at the far end of the containment chamber snapped Ben out of his spiral of self-recrimination. A group of test subjects, their bodies pulsing with an eerie bioluminescence, had broken free of their restraints and were advancing on the terrified researchers. "Containment breach!" someone shouted, their voice high and panicked. "Lockdown protocol initiated." Ben reached for Elara, intending to pull her to safety, but she was already moving, sprinting towards the breach with a determined set to her jaw. "Elara!" Ben called after her, his heart in his throat. "What are you doing?" She glanced back over her shoulder, her eyes blazing with a fierce, unyielding light. "We can't let them escape, Benedict. If they get out, if they spread the plague." She let the implication hang in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the horror they both knew could come to pass. Ben hesitated for a fraction of a second, torn between his fear for Elara and his duty to contain the outbreak. But in the end, there was no choice. With a muttered curse, he raced after her, his pulse pounding in his ears as they plunged into the chaos. The next few minutes were a blur of desperate action and frenzied violence. Ben and Elara fought side by side, using every scrap of knowledge and skill they possessed to subdue the rampaging test subjects. Ben felt a strange, exhilarating rush as he unleashed the full force of his intellect and training, his mind and body working in perfect synergy to combat the threat. But even as they struggled to contain the breach, Ben couldn't shake the growing sense of unease, the feeling that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. The test subjects, for all their monstrous transformations, seemed to be acting with a disturbing level of coordination, their movements almost purposeful. And then, in a moment of shocking clarity, he saw her, Miranda, the young woman who had been the most promising of their test subjects, the one whose progress they had followed with such hope and anticipation. She stood at the center of the containment chamber, her body wreathed in tendrils of pulsing, sickly light. Her eyes, once warm and expressive, now glowed with an otherworldly intensity, a bottomless hunger that made Ben's blood run cold. "Miranda?" he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. What's happened to you?" She smiled, a slow, predatory curl of her lips that sent a shiver racing down Ben's spine. "I've transcended, Dr. Vasquez. I've embraced the power of the Erebus Plague, the gift that will elevate humanity to its rightful place among the stars." Elara stepped forward, her voice shaking with a mixture of horror and awe. "Miranda, listen to me. This isn't you. This isn't what you want. The plague, it's twisting your mind, controlling you." Miranda laughed, a sound that was at once beautiful and terrifying. "Oh, Dr. Vestri, you've always been so naive, so blind to the true potential of your work. The Erebus Plague isn't a curse, it's a blessing, a key to unlocking the next stage of human evolution." She raised her hand, and Ben felt an invisible force slam into his chest, driving the breath from his lungs. He flew backwards, crashing into a bank of equipment with a sickening crunch. Through the haze of pain and disorientation, he saw Elara charge at Miranda, a scalpel clutched in her white-knuckled fist. But the Erebus-enhanced woman was too fast, too strong. She caught Elara's wrist in an unbreakable grip, twisting until the scalpel clattered to the floor. "Foolish," Miranda hissed, her face inches from Elara's. "You think you can stop me, stop us? We are the future, and we will not be denied." With a casual flick of her wrist, she sent Elara flying, her body slamming into the wall with a sickening thud. Ben struggled to rise, his vision swimming, his heart pounding with a sickening mixture of fear and rage. Miranda turned to face him, her glowing eyes boring into his with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "Join us, Dr. Vasquez," she purred, her voice a seductive whisper in his mind. "Embrace the power of the Erebus Plague, and together we can shape the destiny of the human race." For a moment, Ben felt himself waver, tempted by the dark promise in Miranda's words. To wield such power, to transcend the limitations of his frail, human form. But then, through the fog of pain and confusion, he heard Elara's voice, weak and strained, but filled with an unbreakable determination. "Benedict, don't listen to her. You're stronger than this, stronger than the plague. Fight it, fight her." And with those words, Ben felt something snap inside him, a final, unbreakable thread of humanity that refused to be swallowed by the darkness. He staggered to his feet, his eyes blazing with a fierce, unyielding light. "No," he said, his voice ringing with a clarity and strength that surprised even him. "I won't be your pawn, Miranda. I won't let you twist me, twist everything we've worked for, into something monstrous." Miranda's face contorted with rage, the glowing tendrils around her body lashing out like whips. "Then you will die, Doctor. You and everyone else who stands in our way." The containment chamber erupted into a maelstrom of chaos and destruction, as Miranda and her Erebus-enhanced followers unleashed the full force of their terrifying powers. Ben and Elara fought with everything they had, their skills and training pushed to the limit as they struggled to survive the onslaught. But even as they battled for their lives, Ben could feel a creeping sense of despair, a realization that they were hopelessly outmatched. Miranda and her cohorts were too strong, too fast, their abilities enhanced to godlike levels by the mutating virus. And then, just as all seemed lost, a deafening explosion rocked the containment chamber, the walls buckling inward as a blinding light flooded the room. Through the smoke and debris, Ben caught a glimpse of heavily armed soldiers pouring into the chamber, their weapons trained on Miranda and her followers. "Stand down!" A voice boomed, amplified by a crackling loudspeaker. "This is the United Terran Federation. You are under arrest for crimes against humanity." Miranda let out a shriek of rage, her body convulsing as she unleashed a wave of psionic energy that sent the soldiers flying. But more kept coming, their numbers and firepower overwhelming even the Erebus-enhanced test subjects. In the chaos, Ben felt a hand grasp his arm, pulling him towards the exit. He turned to see Elara, her face streaked with blood and grime, her eyes wide with a desperate urgency. "We have to go, Benedict," she panted, her voice barely audible over the din of battle. "This is our chance, our only chance to get out of here and expose the truth." Ben hesitated, his gaze drawn back to the raging battle, to Miranda's writhing, screaming form as she was slowly overwhelmed by the UTF soldiers. A part of him longed to stay, to fight, to find some way to save her from the monster she had become. But he knew, with a sinking certainty, that it was too late. The Miranda he had known, the brilliant, passionate woman who had captured his heart and mind, was gone, consumed by the ravenous hunger of the Erebus Plague. With a final, agonized look, he turned and fled, letting Elara guide him through the twisting corridors of Prometheus Station. They ran like the hounds of hell were on their heels, their breath coming in ragged gasps, their hearts pounding with a desperate, animal fear. And as they burst out into the cold, starlit void of the station's exterior, Ben felt a grim resolve settle over him, a steely determination to see this through to the bitter end. The Erebus Plague had claimed its victims, had twisted the brightest minds of humanity into something dark and monstrous. But he would not let it claim his soul, would not let it extinguish the last, flickering embers of his humanity. He would fight, alongside Elara and anyone else who would stand with them, to expose the IMC's crimes, to bring the architects of this horror to justice. And though the road ahead would be long and perilous, though the scars left by the Erebus Plague might never fully heal, he would not rest until the truth was known, until the light of reason and compassion banished the shadows of fear and madness. The containment breach had been the spark, the catalyst that set the wheels of insurrection in motion. And now, as Ben and Elara vanished into the depths of space, their stolen shuttle carrying them towards an uncertain future, the flames of rebellion began to spread, a wildfire that would soon engulf the stars themselves. The war for the soul of humanity had begun, and in the crucible of that conflict, the true measure of their species would be taken. Would they rise above the primal darkness that lurked within, the hunger for power and domination that had driven them to the brink of annihilation? Or would they succumb to the siren song of the Erebus Plague, embracing the twisted path to godhood that Miranda and her kind promised, even if it meant sacrificing everything that made them human? Only time would tell, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. But as Ben looked out at the endless expanse of stars, he felt a flicker of something that might have been hope, a whisper of defiance against the gathering dark. They had each other, he and Elara, and the unbreakable bond of trust and love that had carried them through the trials of Prometheus Station. And though the battles to come would test them to their limits, though the price of victory might be higher than they could ever imagine, they would face the unknown together, united by the unquenchable fire of the human spirit. The Erebus Plague had awoken a monster within the heart of humanity, a primal hunger that threatened to consume them all. But it had also awoken something else, something stronger and more enduring than any virus or mutation. It had awoken the indomitable will to survive, to fight, to cling to the light even in the deepest darkness. And in the end, that would be their greatest weapon, their final hope against the horrors that awaited them in the uncharted reaches of the cosmos. So they ran, Ben and Elara, the renegade doctor and the brilliant xenogeneticist, racing towards a destiny that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. Behind them, the fires of insurrection burned, a testament to the unyielding spirit of a species that refused to go gently into the night, and before them, the stars beckoned, a promise of endless possibilities, of wonders and terrors beyond imagining. It was a journey that would test them to their very core, but one they would face with heads held high and hearts unyielding. For they were human, the children of Earth, and in the face of the infinite dark, they would rage against the dying of the light, now and forever, unto the very end of the cosmos. The stolen shuttle hurtled through the void, its engines straining as Dr. Ben Vasquez pushed them to their limits. Beside him, Dr. Elara Vestri watched the stars streak by, her eyes distant and haunted. "I can't believe it," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "Miranda, the others, they're really gone. Aren't they?" consumed by that thing we created. Ben reached over, his hand finding hers in the dimness of the cockpit. We didn't create this, Elara. The IMC did, with their lies and their secrecy and their twisted ambitions. We were just pawns in their game. Elara turned to him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. But we played our part, Benedict. We helped them, even if we didn't know the full extent of what they were doing. And now the whole galaxy is paying the price. Ben squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, the pulse of her heartbeat beneath his fingers. In the chaos and horror of the last few days, she had been his anchor, his one constant in a universe gone mad. We'll make it right, Elara. We'll find a way to stop the Erebus Plague, to bring the IMC to justice. No matter what it takes, no matter how long we have to fight, we won't let them win. Elara held his gaze, a flicker of something deep and profound passing between them. Slowly, tentatively, she leaned in, her lips brushing against his in a soft, tender kiss. Ben felt his breath catch, his heart pounding as he pulled her closer, losing himself in the taste of her, the scent of her hair, the heat of her body. In that moment, the galaxy outside faded away, and all that mattered was the woman in his arms, the connection between them that transcended the horrors they had endured. But the moment was shattered by a sudden, urgent beeping from the shuttle's comm system. Ben pulled away reluctantly, his mind snapping back to the grim reality of their situation. What is it? Elara asked, her voice husky with emotion. Ben scanned the readouts, his eyes widening as he took in the information scrolling across the screen. It's a distress signal, from a colony world called Arcadia. They're under attack, by the UTF. Elara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The UTF? But why would they be attacking a civilian colony? Ben's jaw tightened, his mind racing as he put the pieces together. Arcadia was one of the first worlds hit by the Erebus Plague. The IMC used it as a testing ground for their early experiments, before they moved their operations to Prometheus Station. He turned to Elara, his eyes blazing with a grim determination. Don't you see? The UTF isn't there to help the colonists, they're there to contain the outbreak, to cover up the IMC's crimes, and they'll burn the whole planet to ash to do it. Elara's face paled, but her eyes hardened with a resolve that matched his own. Then we have to stop them. We have to save those people, expose the truth of what's happening. Ben nodded, his hands already flying over the controls as he plotted a new course. Hang on, he said, his voice grim. We're about to dive headfirst into the fire. The shuttle shuddered as it hit the atmosphere of Arcadia, the viewport filled with the orange glow of re-entry. As they descended through the clouds, the true scope of the devastation below became apparent. The once thriving colony was a smoking ruin, its cities reduced to rubble, its fields and forests blasted to ash. The sky was choked with the acrid smoke of 1,000 fires, and the air was filled with the distant thunder of orbital bombardment. And in the midst of it all, the UTF forces clashed with a ragtag band of survivors, the colonists fighting with the desperate fury of those who had nothing left to lose. Among them, Ben could see the telltale signs of Erebus mutation, the glowing eyes and pulsing, bioluminescent veins of those touched by the plague. My God, Elara breathed, her face ashen as she took in the scene of apocalyptic destruction. They're not just containing the outbreak, they're exterminating the infected. Ben's hands tightened on the controls, his mind racing as he sought a way to turn the tide of the battle. And then, with a sudden, gut-wrenching clarity, he saw it. There, he said, pointing to a massive, fortified compound at the heart of the colony. That's the IMC's research facility, where they first unleashed the Erebus Plague. If we can get inside, find evidence of their experiments. Elara nodded, her eyes alight with a fierce, determined blaze. We can expose their crimes, turn the tide of public opinion against them. The UTF, the IMC, they'll have nowhere left to hide. Ben brought the shuttle down in a screeching, bone-jarring landing, the hull shuddering as it skidded across the war-torn landscape. As the ramp lowered, he and Elara raced out into the chaos, their pulses pounding, their minds focused on the monumental task ahead. They fought their way through the embattled streets, dodging UTF patrols and Erebus-enhanced colonists alike. Ben felt a strange, exhilarating rush as he unleashed the skills he had honed in the IMC's service, his body moving with a fluid, deadly grace as he dispatched the enemies in his path. At his side, Elara was a blur of motion, her lithe, agile form dancing through the mayhem with a breathtaking beauty. Together, they were an unstoppable force. a phoenix rising from the ashes of betrayal and despair. As they neared the IMC compound, the resistance intensified, the UTF forces throwing everything they had at the intruders. But Ben and Elara would not be denied, their determination fueled by the righteousness of their cause, the unbreakable bond that had forged between them. In a final, desperate push, they breached the compound's defenses, racing through the labyrinthine corridors towards the heart of the facility. And there, in a cavernous chamber filled with the pulsing, eerie glow of Erebus technology, they found what they sought: data cores, filled with terabytes of damning evidence, research logs, detailing the horrific experiments conducted on the people of Arcadia, and at the center of it all, a name, repeated over and over again in the flickering holographic displays: Dr. Lucas Stein, the mastermind behind Project Prometheus, the architect of the Erebus Plague, the man who had played God with the lives of millions, all in the name of power and ambition. "We've got him," Ben said, his voice shaking with a mixture of triumph and rage. "We've got the proof we need to bring the whole sordid enterprise crashing down." But even as the words left his mouth, a bone-chilling laugh echoed through the chamber, a sound that froze the blood in his veins. He spun around, his eyes widening as he beheld the figure emerging from the shadows. Dr. Stein himself, his face a mask of cruel, arrogant amusement, and at his side, a legion of UTF soldiers, their weapons trained on Ben and Elara with unwavering precision. "Bravo, Dr. Vasquez," Stein said, his voice dripping with mocking condescension. "You and your lovely colleague have come further than I ever expected. Such tenacity, such brilliance, it's almost a shame to snuff it out." Ben's jaw tightened, his hand inching towards the pulse pistol at his side. "It's over, Stein. We have the evidence. We know the truth about the Erebus Plague. You're finished." Stein's smile only widened, his eyes glinting with a fanatical light. "Oh, you naive boy. You still don't understand, do you? The Erebus Plague isn't a failed experiment, it's the future of humanity, the key to our ascension to godhood." He spread his arms wide, his voice rising with a zealot's fervor. "The mutations, the transformations you've witnessed, they're just the beginning. With the power of the Erebus strain, we can reshape human destiny itself, transcend the barriers of mortality and become what we were always meant to be." Elara shook her head, her face twisted with revulsion. "You're insane, Stein. Look around you, at the devastation you've caused, the lives you've destroyed. This isn't transcendence, it's murder on a cosmic scale." Stein's eyes flashed, his gaze fixing on Elara with a hungry intensity. "I can see what he admires in you, Dr. Vestri. All that fire, that passion, and such a lovely vessel to contain it." He smiled, a cold, predatory curl of his lips. "Such a shame to waste it on a small-minded fool like Vasquez. Join me, and I promise you pleasures beyond your wildest dreams, power that few mortals could even comprehend." Ben's vision went red, a searing, primal rage surging through his veins. "You shut your mouth, Stein," he snarled, his hand closing around his pistol's grip. "You so much as breathe in her direction, and I'll show you just how small-minded I am, you twisted son of a bitch." Stein only laughed, a sound as cold and empty as the depths of space. "Ah, young love, how touchingly pathetic. I'm afraid you've both outlived your usefulness, but don't worry, I'll put you out of your miseries soon enough." He motioned to the soldiers surrounding them, a casual flick of his wrist. "Kill them." The world devolved into a maelstrom of chaos and violence, pulse fire sizzling through the air as Ben and Elara dove for cover. They fought with a desperate, feral intensity, their minds and bodies perfectly in sync as they battled for survival. But it was a losing fight, and they both knew it. The UTF soldiers were too many, too well armed, and Stein's twisted genius had equipped them with Erebus-enhanced weaponry that tore through their defenses like tissue paper. In a final, desperate gambit, Ben lunged for the chamber's central control panel, his fingers flying over the keys as he initiated the facility's self-destruct sequence. Alarms blared and warning lights flashed, the countdown to oblivion scrolling across the screens in glaring red digits. "Ben!" Elara screamed, her voice raw with anguish as she saw what he was doing. "Don't, please, there has to be another way." But Ben shook his head, his eyes meeting hers with a calm, unwavering resolve. "This is the only way, Elara, the only way to stop Stein, to make sure the Erebus Plague never sees the light of day again." He reached out, his hand finding hers across the chaos, his grip strong and steady. "I love you, Elara. I always have, and I always will. No matter what happens, no matter what comes next, remember that, okay? Elara's eyes filled with tears, her voice choked with emotion. You bastard, she whispered. You beautiful, selfless, idiotic bastard. I love you too, Benedict Vasquez. More than anything in this whole goddamn universe. And then, heedless of the destruction raging around them, they came together in a final, searing kiss, a supernova of passion and desperation and bittersweet farewell. The world melted away, and for one glorious, infinite moment, there was nothing but the feel of her in his arms, the taste of her on his lips, the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. But the moment couldn't last forever. With a final, agonized look, Ben tore himself away, his hand slamming down on the control panel's activation key. The countdown reached 0, and the world dissolved into fire and light and searing, unbearable heat. In the heart of the inferno, Dr. Lucas Stein screamed his defiance and disbelief, his dreams of godhood crumbling to ash in the face of the power he had sought to control. The UTF soldiers, the Erebus-enhanced abominations, the twisted fruits of his labors, all were consumed in the cleansing flames, the facility collapsing in on itself like a dying star. And at the center of it all, Ben and Elara clung to each other, their bodies shielded from the worst of the blast by the control panel's reinforced frame. They held each other as the world ended around them, their minds and souls intertwined in a bond that transcended the boundaries of flesh and blood. In the end, they emerged from the rubble like phoenixes from the ashes, battered and bloodied but unbroken. They stood hand in hand amidst the smoking ruins of the IMC facility, their eyes fixed on the horizon, on the long road ahead. The war was far from over. The Erebus Plague still lurked in the shadows, and the corruption of the IMC and UTF ran deep. But they had struck a blow for freedom, for justice, for the dignity of the human spirit, and in each other, they had found the strength to keep fighting, to keep hoping, to keep building a future worth living for. A future where the horrors of the past would be nothing more than a distant memory, where the light of knowledge and compassion would banish the darkness of fear and ignorance. Together, they would stand against the coming storm, a beacon of defiance in a galaxy consumed by chaos, for they were the Prometheus unbound, the bringers of fire and light, and their love would be the crucible in which the fate of worlds was forged. So they walked forward, into the uncertain tomorrow, ready to face whatever trials lay ahead, for they had each other, and in the end, that was all that mattered, all that would ever matter, from now until the stars themselves burned out and faded away. Their story was just beginning, and the universe would tremble at the fury of their passage, for they were Dr. Benedict Vasquez and Dr. Elara Vestri, the renegades of Prometheus Station, and they would not go quietly into the shadows. Not now, not ever. The smoke-filled skies of Arcadia faded into the star-strewn vastness of space as Dr. Ben Vasquez and Dr. Elara Vestri made their escape, the stolen UTF shuttle carrying them away from the ruins of the IMC research facility and the ashes of their old lives. In the wake of the cataclysmic events on the planet's surface, a stunned silence filled the cockpit, broken only by the soft beeping of the navigation console and the hum of the engines. Ben and Elara sat side by side, their hands clasped tightly together, each lost in their own thoughts as they grappled with the enormity of what they had just experienced. It was Elara who spoke first, her voice soft and heavy with emotion. We did it, Benedict. We struck a blow against the IMC, against the Erebus Plague. But the cost, God, the cost was so high. Ben nodded, his eyes haunted by the memories of the lives lost, the sacrifices made. I know, Elara. And it's not over yet. Stein may be dead, but his legacy lives on. The Erebus Plague is still out there, and there will be others like him, others who seek to harness its power for their own twisted ends. Elara turned to him, her gaze fierce and determined despite the tears that glistened in her eyes. Then we keep fighting, Benedict. We use the evidence we gathered, the knowledge we gained, and we shine a light on the darkness. We make sure the whole damn galaxy knows the truth about what the IMC and the UTF have done. Ben smiled softly, his heart swelling with love and admiration for the woman beside him. Together, he said, his voice rough with emotion, we do it together, Elara. No matter what comes next, no matter how hard the road ahead may be, we face it as one. Elara leaned in, resting her forehead against his, her breath warm and sweet against his skin. Always, she whispered, in this life and whatever comes after, Benedict Vasquez, you're stuck with me, now and forever. They held each other then, drawing strength and comfort from the simple, profound connection they shared. And though the future was uncertain, though the shadows of the Erebus Plague and the machinations of their enemies still loomed large, they knew that they would face it all with unwavering resolve and the unbreakable bond of their love. As the shuttle hurtled through the void, carrying them towards an unknown destiny, Ben and Elara began to plan their next move. They would seek out allies, other scientists and soldiers and civilians who had been touched by the Erebus Plague and the corruption that followed in its wake. They would build a network of resistance, a web of information and support that would span the breadth of the galaxy. And at the center of it all, they would stand tall and unbowed, a beacon of hope and defiance in a universe consumed by darkness. They were the Prometheans, the bringers of light and knowledge, and they would not rest until the truth was known and justice was served. But even as they laid their plans and steeled their resolve, they knew that the greatest challenges still lay ahead. The Erebus Plague was a hydra, its heads ever multiplying, its power growing with each passing day, and the forces that sought to control it, to wield it as a weapon of domination and destruction, were vast and ruthless and endlessly cunning. In the end, it would come down to a final confrontation, a last stand against the tides of darkness. And on that day, Ben and Elara would be ready, their minds and hearts and souls united in a single, unwavering purpose. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for all those who had been lost, all those who had suffered under the yoke of the IMC and the UTF. They would fight for the future, for the hope of a galaxy free from the shadows of fear and oppression. And above all, they would fight for each other, for the love that had sustained them through the crucible of Prometheus Station and the fires of Arcadia. It would not be an easy battle, nor a painless one. They would be tested to the limits of their strength and beyond, forced to confront horrors and heartbreaks that would shake the very foundations of their being. But they would endure, buoyed by the unbreakable bonds of their partnership and the indomitable resilience of the human spirit. And in the end, when the smoke cleared and the dust settled, they would emerge victorious, the Erebus Plague vanquished and the corrupt powers that had sought to control it brought to their knees. They would stand hand in hand among the stars, their love a shining testament to the unconquerable will of those who refused to submit to the darkness. Their story would become legend, passed down from generation to generation, a tale of hope and heroism in the face of overwhelming odds. And though the scars of their struggle would never fully fade, though the memories of the lost would always linger, they would find peace in each other's arms and purpose in the ongoing fight for a better tomorrow. For they were Dr. Benedict Vasquez and Dr. Elara Vestri, the renegades of Prometheus Station, the Prometheans who had dared to challenge the gods themselves. And their love, their unbreakable bond, would be the light that guided the galaxy through its darkest hour, the flame that ignited the hearts of all those who yearned for a future worth fighting for. As their shuttle blazed a trail across the stars, carrying them towards their next great adventure, Ben and Elara looked to the future with hope and determination in their eyes. They had each other, and they had their mission, and in the end, that was all that mattered. The Erebus Plague had been a nightmare, a horror beyond imagining, but it had also been a crucible, a test of the human spirit that had forged them into something stronger, something greater than they ever could have imagined. And as they faced the unknown together, they knew that they would never stop fighting, never stop striving, until the galaxy was free and the dream of a better tomorrow was made manifest. Their love was a beacon, a promise, a testament to the indomitable power of the human heart, and it would guide them through whatever trials lay ahead, whatever darkness sought to bar their way.